Helped by others on the inside, that she really thought she, rather than Kate, should be the next queen after Charles. She couldn't understand why she, better looking and, in her view, more intelligent and harder working and everything, should be the queen. She undoubtedly manipulated him and used and exploited his weaknesses.
He isn't guessing. He was told, and what he was told is far more serious than simple manipulation. She wanted the crown. The palace knew about it. They even warned the queen. But now listen closely to the 4 words most people completely skipped over: helped by others on the inside. Bower didn't just dream this up in some study in North London. Someone who had been in those rooms allegedly sat down and told him what she actually wanted.
Kate could see quite immediately that Meghan was furious that they were living in a small house in Kensington Palace compared to the sumptuous 20 rooms.
And I'll tell you who that person was, and what had already been done about it, before this story is over, because the people involved apparently didn't keep it to themselves either. Let's start with where he said it, because that detail matters. This wasn't some tabloid rewrite or a chopped-up soundbite spreading online. Bower said it directly, on camera, during an interview, while discussing betrayal, his account of the family's turbulent last 7 years. Read it slowly, because every clause hits harder than it first appears.
The truth is that the conversation, I'm told and I believe, was very early on in their relationship when Harry is bowled over by Meghan, is desperately in love, and already is talking about marriage.
Better looking, more intelligent, harder working. And then comes the line that really changes the tone. She hated being so far down the order. Better looking. In her view, that 3-word detail is Bower being very deliberate. He isn't simply calling her deluded. He's explaining what she reportedly believed about herself and letting you judge the meaning for yourself.
Human about her when she appears, because she's so vulnerable, because she's such a narcissist, because she has no understanding of how to traffic herself.
And the ranking is where things get interesting. She wasn't comparing herself to a position. She was comparing herself to another woman. Because here's what many people seem to miss. The line of succession isn't a popularity contest that you can win by being smarter, working harder, or becoming more popular.
Accusation of Harry and Meghan as being contrived, in the same breath as you admit Kate can basically do what she likes, and yes, you said it was schmaltzy, etc., etc.
It's determined by rules of birth and succession, and personal ambition doesn't simply change the order. Harry was born second. That was the basic reality. And according to the accounts Bower has presented, it was apparently a reality she struggled to accept. I've spent days going through the available material for this story, including the podcast, the book, and public palace statements. So, if you want the story handled carefully, instead of turned into pure shouting, subscribe. It's free, and it takes 1 tap.
Had report after report from people who have witnessed unacceptable behaviour towards another royal staffer. Now, it's one thing for Markle to allegedly bully her aides, but quite another to be taking pot shots at little Charlotte, who would have been, well, no more than a toddler at the time.
Then tell me in the comments whether you think she truly believed it. The Sussexes did not let this one go, and that's the part I find genuinely revealing. For years, their public approach had often been about privacy, dignity, and refusing to respond to every criticism. Yet in March, a spokesperson appeared to push back against the claims, describing them as fixation involving people the speaker did not know or had never met. That wasn't just silence. It was a direct response to something that had clearly landed.
Go into firefighting mode and issue a statement denying an article, but it's not unknown for them to take legal action.
ET has confirmed the royals' lawyers sent a letter asking Tatler to pull their story.
And then came another curious moment. A cryptic post about kindness appeared on her account and was later removed. There was no public explanation for the deletion, and no clear statement about why it disappeared. For someone who has spoken so strongly about privacy, that creates a trail of questions. But Bower didn't back away from his controversial claim. Instead, he clarified that his remarks about wanting silence were not a call for anyone's destruction. He said he was referring to the effect he believed their actions had on the family and argued that the damage was permanent. Whether you agree with that view or not, there is another detail worth noticing.
The woman was self-centered, self-obsessed, a bit of a narcissist. But seeing all these scenes surrounding her 46th birthday, even I, a veteran Meghan observer, was shocked. I mean, my God, as I said, this is turbocharged narcissism on steroids. No one else matters.
He did not withdraw his claim about the Queen. And that brings us to the timing, which may be the most striking part. In the same conversation, Bauer said the concerns had been reported to the Queen. We reported it to the Queen. That is a very different claim from simply repeating gossip. According to his account, the concern was passed up the chain before the marriage. So think about that sequence for a second. The alleged warning came before the wedding, before Windsor, and before millions watched the ceremony unfold on television. Somebody had already put the concern in front of Elizabeth II, and the wedding went ahead anyway. I've got a theory about why, and honestly, it doesn't make the palace look great. The palace had spent years being accused of being cold, especially after the criticism surrounding Diana and claims that the institution pushed away people who didn't fit the mould.
No, absolutely not. And again, this establishment figure reported to the Queen that Meghan thinks that once she marries into the royal family, she's going to be God.
Yeah, exactly.
Then came a bride who, in the eyes of much of the public, was being presented as the answer to exactly those old complaints. So what could the palace realistically do? Publicly turn against her? They would have faced a brutal backlash. The concern may have been reviewed, but the decision was apparently made to move forward. And according to this account, that choice shaped everything that followed. But here's where Bauer moves from describing an attitude to describing what he says was a strategy. Kinsey asked him a straightforward question. Did Meghan study Catherine? Did she copy her? His answer was much more calculated than that. He described 3 steps: promote herself, establish that she could be the stronger future queen, and then, whenever Kate and William did something publicly, place something of her own alongside it so their announcement lost attention and she remained at the centre. That's not simply jealousy.
Jessica's daughter during a bridesmaid fitting in the lead up to the wedding. And according to the author, Kate, who was already irritated by complaints of Meghan bullying her staff, broke down in tears.
If his description is accurate, jealousy can be passive. This sounds like a deliberate pattern. And once you start looking at the timeline, the argument becomes impossible to ignore. A Netflix trailer appearing around the same period as a Wales engagement, or an announcement landing close to a major state occasion. Each incident can have an innocent explanation. But when similar timing keeps happening, people naturally start asking questions. Once might be coincidence. Twice could be bad luck. But repeated patterns start looking like a calendar. Then Kinsey produced the detail that made me stop and pay attention. In Betrayal, there's a passage where Meghan is told she was lucky Harry chose her, and she reportedly responds that the idea is a gendered stereotype because, in her view, he was lucky she chose him. The striking part is the similarity to something Catherine had reportedly said years earlier, almost word for word. At the same time, Meghan has said she knew very little about the royal family before meeting Harry, despite having written about Catherine's wedding on her own lifestyle blog.
I think she wouldn't want to emulate her. She just wants to undermine her and beat her. I mean, that's the whole point. She's constantly looking for opportunities, first of all, to promote herself. Secondly, to say that she would be a better future queen. And thirdly, to make sure whenever Kate and William do anything, she sort of balances it with something that she's done, knowing she will squash.
So now you're left with a question. Was this an extraordinary coincidence, or had she done more homework than she let on? Bauer's interpretation is even sharper. He doesn't see it simply as copying Catherine. He sees it as trying to replace her position in the public narrative. That's his argument anyway. And now we get to the person in the room, because there's another claim in the book that has attracted serious attention, the description of a divisive agent. Then comes the detail that really stands out. Bauer claimed Harry changed his phone number without telling members of his own family. Forget the word brainwashed for a moment. That was the phrase that grabbed the headlines. The phone number is the detail that raises a different question. A grown man quietly cutting off the usual line of contact with people who had known him for years is a significant move. Nobody makes an announcement about that. One day, you simply call, and the number no longer works. And Camilla, of all people, would understand the cost of being painted as the villain in someone else's story. She spent decades facing intense public criticism herself.
The British royal family's initiative and hopefully put herself on top. I mean, this is really where it's all really quite ugly and quite nasty. And it's all part of the betrayal, which is, I think now, leading to a new climax.
If she made such a judgment, she would know exactly how serious that accusation could be. She isn't even the harshest voice in that book. Bower reports that Andrew, of all people, dismissed her as an opportunist. When a controversial member of the family is the one calling you a chancer, you know the criticism has reached a pretty serious level. Right, let's talk about the money, because claims this big usually come with a bill attached, and Bower says he's got the numbers. Columbia, 2024.
Members of the royal family tried to manipulate Harry's friends, and they all saw through it, and they all tried to warn him that she was bad news. And it wasn't just that they questioned her intentions and integrity.
A 4-day tour at the invitation of the Vice President. From the beginning, Bower describes the trip as surrounded by questions, starting with one basic issue nobody seemed able to answer clearly. Who paid for the plane? Then there's the figure Bower highlights, $8,000. He says that was the amount left for the Vice President's charities after a tour promoted around the benefits those organisations were expected to receive. Put that beside the reported 6-figure fees the couple can command for a single speaking appearance, and the contrast becomes hard to ignore. And the aircraft.
Ridiculous lie perpetrated by Harry and Meghan. How sad to have traded that for whatever it is they have in Montecito.
Bower says the Vice President's office indicated that the Soros Foundation had covered the cost, while the foundation itself declined to confirm or deny the claim. So the question remained. Somebody paid for the flight, but the public explanation stayed murky. Meanwhile, Bower counts the outfits. 4 or 5 changes a day, with links showing viewers where to buy the dresses, bags, and earrings. If commissions were attached to those links, that creates another layer to the story. At that point, critics could reasonably ask whether the trip was as much about public service as it was about personal branding. And the speech? She stood before a relatively small Colombian audience and encouraged the women there to rise up and empower themselves, while standing beside a vice president who had risen from poverty to become one of the country's most powerful political figures. Then she moved on to talking about Lilibet. There was no major press release afterward, and Bower applies the same close examination to a One Young World speech with equally sharp criticism. He writes that an organiser was unhappy because Meghan thanked the summit for recognising something she wanted to see in herself, before spending around 10 minutes discussing her own rise to fame at a leadership event focused on young people.
We'll just recognise that the Sussex brand is toxic today.
Well, I think there's that, but also, people at that level of the stratosphere always looking over somebody else's shoulders, they're talking to see who's more important.
That's Bower's interpretation, and it's certainly a pointed one, because, according to his broader argument, the same pattern keeps appearing. She's placed beside a cause, an organisation, or a public figure, and by the end of the event, the focus has shifted back toward her. So that's the case Bower has been building since March. If the story ended there, it would simply be a controversial account making some very strong claims. But then came a development that put those claims under a much brighter spotlight. King Charles opened Highgrove, his private residence, and met with Harry, Meghan, and his grandchildren after years of limited contact. Camilla was reportedly present throughout the meeting. There were no cameras, no official photograph, and no detailed statement afterward. The meeting lasted roughly an hour, although one figure that circulated afterward was 47 minutes. And the reported condition attached to the meeting was simple: keep it private. A warm and highly sympathetic account of that same afternoon later appeared in People and the New York Times. But it wasn't just the emotional tone that caught attention. It was the level of detail. Who supposedly said what, who appeared warm, who seemed distant, and the quiet suggestion underneath it all about who might be the real obstacle inside the family. Remember the reported condition attached to the Highgrove visit? Keep it private. Then, 9 days later, details appeared in People and the New York Times, with coverage that also drew comparisons with William. At what point does a private leak start looking like a deliberate media strategy? That's the question critics began asking, and that's when the connection clicked for me. If Bauer's description is accurate, this wasn't a new tactic at all. It was step 3 of the strategy he had described months earlier.
Meghan, of course, had another take on it entirely. She wanted the dog and was prepared to do whatever it took to get it. She would never have thought she was being ruthless, just clever and using everything at her disposal to get her own way, being a winner.
Whenever the Waleses do something publicly, place something of your own alongside it and make sure your story gets the attention. The setting had simply changed. Before, it might have involved an engagement or public appearance. This time, it involved a private meeting at the King's own residence. Bauer's judgment of the aftermath was especially severe. He used the word poison and directed it at Harry, arguing that the behaviour was damaging to the institution itself. His advice to the King was even more blunt. Create distance and make it clear that the Sussexes should not expect a welcome back to Britain anytime soon. And months earlier, Bauer had already argued that the Sussex brand faced serious problems unless it could maintain a meaningful connection to the royal family it had publicly criticised. Which is the trap, isn't it? The only major asset they may still have is their connection to the family, and the more they use that connection for public battles, the more complicated it becomes. Back to the order, because we're nearly at the answer, and I haven't forgotten what I promised you. According to Bauer's argument, she got many of the things she wanted, then realised there were things she simply could not have. And that, he suggests, is why she never intended to stay in the first place. Look at that claim alongside the succession, and it becomes less about emotion and more about basic arithmetic. Whatever she achieved, she was never going to outrank a woman whose husband was born first. There is no working harder around that. No rebrand can change it. It's one door that ambition alone cannot open.
You have such incredible sources in betrayal, and you go into that breakdown of the relationship with Dr. Sophie Shandaka and Prince Harry in detail.
And there's another detail from the book that Bauer uses to support his argument. He says she had previously declined an invitation to Balmoral while the Queen was still alive. So when the Queen became seriously ill, Bauer claims Meghan wanted to be present because she understood the historical importance of the moment and wanted to be seen alongside Kate. That's his interpretation, and it's a serious allegation. Whether the motive was grief, duty, public perception, or something else entirely is impossible to know from the outside. But the distinction matters. So who told him? Here's what Bauer has actually put on the record, and notice how carefully he phrases it. He says his conclusion was helped by others on the inside. He says the concern was reported to the Queen. And he attributes the brainwash description to a conversation Camilla reportedly had with a friend. And in his account, Bauer says staff members who once worked in that household have spoken to him, but he never names a single one of them. Not one. And that may not simply be evasion. It could be an attempt to protect people who may still work for the institution or depend on it financially. If that's true, the source might not be some disgruntled former employee looking for attention and a book deal. It could be someone with enough knowledge or seniority that being identified would have serious consequences. Here's my honest read, for what it's worth. I think it's possible that the people who raised concerns with the Queen and the people who later spoke with Bauer came from the same circle. Perhaps they held similar views from the early days, saw their concerns overruled, and then watched events unfold for years. Now the people involved have to deal with the aftermath. So the real answer to Meghan Markle's question, why not me, may have been shaped by the rules of the institution long before the wedding ever happened. According to Bauer's account, the concerns were already being raised before she walked down that aisle. And maybe that's why the Sussexes reacted so strongly to a paragraph in a book when they've ignored plenty of harsher criticism over the years. You can dismiss a biographer's opinion. But if the claims are based on information from people inside the institution, that's much harder to brush aside. Bauer's own summary of the entire controversy is 4 words. A story they do not want told. Now I want your take. Do you think she genuinely believed the crown should have been hers? Or is Bauer interpreting ambition as something more extreme? Tell me in the comments. And if you want more deep dives like this, hit like and subscribe. stay close, because there's another name in that book I haven't touched yet, someone connected to that Highgrove meeting who has said almost nothing publicly since. According to Bauer, that silence may be worth watching.